Hi, this is Tessie again. So I'm going to do a video on why GMOs matter, why GMOs are not safe to eat and consume. To start off the bat, other countries are a little more intelligent than America is as far as regulating the food that is allowed to be put into the industry. The FDA currently is not regulating our food supply well at all. I recently talked to someone who does research and works with the FDA, and she said she was pretty blown away at how underregulated the FDA is with our food supply. So, genetically modified organisms at its root are not necessarily bad because we crossbreed all the time, and we have since the beginning of agriculture, I assume, taking two plants and finding a plant that has one thing you really like and another thing you really like in the other plant and combining them. That in itself is not a bad thing, but modern genetic modification, with GMO, genetically modified organisms, modern GMOs have taken it way too many steps further. So, for instance, take the tomato in the store. You go to the store and you buy a red tomato and it looks really bright, and so instinctually we think, oh, it's a ripe tomato. But in reality, it's actually been bred to be really ripe, or be really red but not ripe. It might not even reach full ripening, and the reason in part is so that it can stay on the shelf for longer, it can stay in the bin for longer, and in reality it's not a ripe fruit or vegetable. It just looks ripe so that we think it's ripe instinctually, and that the producers and the marketers and the people in between can have a product that sits on the shelf for longer, so then they will have less loss of products. Let's see, another thing would be, I don't know, at one time I heard that salmon and, I don't know, you hear all this weird shit with genetically modified organisms, like salmon and neon coloring are going to be bred together so that it'll benefit someone in down the road. But at the end of the day, genetically modified organisms basically manipulate the product so that the manufacturers and the suppliers and the marketers are better off. But in the end, the consumer is not. From what I've heard and understand, and please do your own research on this, genetically modified organisms are known to be carcinogenic, and carcinogens are cancer producers. They depress the immune system, and they are a toxin to the body, and they destroy the body's natural, healthy functioning. I personally do not buy anything genetically modified if I know it. At times, I have not cared at all, just because I'm hungry and I like what I see and I want it. But when it really comes down to it, genetically modified organisms usually have a lot of pesticides used with them. In part, there's monoculture that plays into this, so a huge crop of corn would be monoculture. And because plants don't do well in a monoculture realm, and they no longer have biodiversity to protect them, plants work in synergistic in harmony with each other to protect each other from predators. But when you take one plant and you do a ton of it, it no longer has that natural balance. And so then that's when the argument of pesticides comes in, is, well, now we have all these pests and diseases that this plant cannot fight off, and so we have to have pesticides. And the pesticides themselves are immunodepressant and destructive. They kill bees, they kill us, they cause cancer. And so the thing with genetically modified organisms, besides the weird shit you hear about, like salmon and neon color being bred together, the genetically modified organisms are set up so that they will use pesticides and take pesticides well. And then once we go into that realm, we go into seeds and companies patenting seeds. So then seeds are no longer savable, and it's illegal for the farmers to save them, and that messes up the livelihood of the farmers themselves, because they can no longer save seed of this huge crop, which is, I don't know how big. I mean, use your imagination. Have you ever seen a monoculture crop? So that farmer it's illegal for that farmer to save seed, and they have to buy these seeds from these companies, which are the big producers of the pesticides, and if they're not the direct producers, they're in cohorts with each other. And eventually we lead to an ecological disaster because we have monoculture, which is eating up all the soil content, and they're not using a crop, which is giving back to the soil. So a healthy crop or a healthy farming incidents would have cover crops. There would be biodiversity within the crops itself, so that the plants can naturally protect themselves, that the plants will naturally attract bugs and insects that will protect them. Not all bugs are bad. And not all functions within plants are bad. So it's kind of going down a really bad rabbit hole when we buy GMO, when we buy conventional, when we buy pesticides. And it's not really about GMO'd or not GMO'd. It's about the whole fucking bullshit storm that comes with genetically modified organisms, the pesticides, the illegality of saving seed, which is like one of the most basic elements of holding on to life and creating life. Imagine if you ate a ripe tomato and the seeds within it was illegal for you to save those. Literally, you could go to court, someone could take you to court for saving those seeds. Like, it's complete ridiculousness. Last I heard, there were actually farmers committing suicide in India because these overarching international corporations are coming in and basically owning the agriculture and demanding of particular ways of being within the agriculture, which are against the prosperity of the locals. And we have that in America, we have it in other countries. It's an intercontinental issue. Right now, Europe, as far as I've heard, is struggling with banning GMOs. They had it banned, and now it's coming back up for discussion. I personally know that things, when they're GMO'd, are not organic. That to be organic, they cannot be the plants cannot be genetically modified organisms. So I try and buy organic, plus cancer runs in my family. My mother's had cancer, my father's had cancer, my grandmother's had cancer. And I'm a prime candidate for cancer. And I already know that pesticides are a known carcinogen and that they do cause cancer. There is a ton of research out there that is supporting the fact that pesticides have a direct correlation or link that cause an immunosuppressant reaction, and then cancer can proliferate into tumors. So I'd stay away from GMOs. The best way you can stay away from GMOs is to buy organic. And yes, organics are fucking expensive, and it's ridiculous. I worked at Whole Foods from a few years left, and then came back, worked for a few years, and they are the leaders in the market as far as setting organics high as the price goes. They actually, as last I heard, they had a 40% margin on organics, which is fucking ridiculous. If you're living in Europe, there's no real such thing as organics and conventional. Everything is organic. You don't have to say, oh, this is organic. And it's probably changed because it's been about 10 years since I was in Europe. But back then, it wasn't a thing to have organics. Right now, it's an elitist thing to have organics, or you have to go to a local supported agricultural group, like a little farm stand, or you have to grow it yourself. And it's more challenging, it's more expensive, it's more time-consuming to get organic. But at the end, oncology is where you're going to end up if you have a weakness to environmental toxins and cannot flush them due to many stressors in your body. So oncology over spending a little bit of money on organics. Weigh it out in your own mind, do your own research, come up with your own conclusions, but this is what I've found in years of health research, working in small companies like Good Earth and Mother's Kitchen in Costa Mesa, Good Earth in Fairfax, and Whole Foods in Petaluma. I've done enough and seen enough and heard enough where if I'm thinking right, I will be buying organic and I will not be buying conventional and GMO'd, because it's really not a pretty road with the GMOs. Honestly, there is some key companies that are master manipulating the market, and it's not a fucking conspiracy, it's a fact. So do your own research, make up your own mind, and at the end of the day, weigh it out. Do I want to spend the money in oncology and cancer treatment, or do I want to spend a little bit more money in the supermarket? Thanks for listening. Take care.